special thank you to MarketUS.com for furnishing us this information. You can reach them at MarketUS.com or call them at 954-636-3232. Before we go, this deep dive was created by the MarketUS.com team. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. It's right below the subscribe link.
Today is June 2nd, and I'm Nancy, your co-host.
Thanks, Nancy. Welcome. I'm Michael Price, your host.
A single compromised password at a 50-person manufacturing plant in Ohio could actually expose the logistical schedules of an aircraft carrier in the Pacific.
Yeah, which sounds like an exaggeration, but it is a very real threat.
It really is. Welcome to the deep dive. So imagine for a second that you run a highly capable small business, right? You've got a fantastic team, stellar manufacturing, and you are eyeing those incredibly lucrative Department of Defense contracts.
Oh, absolutely. The big leads.
Right? You know you have the skills to deliver, but suddenly, right as you're gearing up to bid, you hit this massive, just seemingly impenetrable wall of acronyms.
Oh yeah, the alphabet soup.
Exactly. We're talking CMMC, NIST, SPRS, CUI. The DoD is aggressively locking down its supply chain right now. And the harsh reality is if you can't speak their highly specific cybersecurity language, well, you are completely locked out of the game.
You are. I mean, it represents a profound shift in how the defense industry operates today. The barrier to entry isn't just about your production capacity anymore, you know?
Right, it's about your data.
Exactly. It's entirely about your data security infrastructure. And for a lot of business owners, staring at that wall of acronyms feels less like a bureaucratic hurdle and, well, more like an electrified fence.
Which is exactly what we are tackling today. We are pulling from a massive stack of compliance notes, framework guides, and specific documentation from any security to really decode this beast known as CMMC 2.0 Level 2.
It is definitely a beast.
It is. So our mission for this deep dive is to simplify these technical requirements for you, especially if you are a smaller operator. We're going to walk through a logical, sequential 12 to 18-month blueprint for actually achieving the certification.
Which is so important because people get overwhelmed.
Oh, completely. And most importantly, we are going to focus on how to build a sustainable security infrastructure, one that protects national security without completely bankrupting your business in the process.
Yeah, that sustainability piece is critical, but because, while the terminology sounds daunting at first glance, the sources reveal a highly systematic process.
Right? It's not just random rules.
No, not at all. It becomes a totally achievable milestone once we connect the dots and understand the underlying logic of what the Department of Defense is actually demanding from its supply chain.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Let's start with the foundation. The overarching framework is called CMMC 2.0, which stands for Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification.
Yes, that's the big umbrella.
Right? And the documents explain that it operates on a tiered system. So you've got level 1, which basically covers basic everyday cyber hygiene, and that scales all the way up to level 3 for advanced, highly complex environments. But our focus today is right in the middle, level 2, which is often called the intermediate tier.
Although calling it intermediate is honestly a bit of a misnomer.
Oh, really? Why is that?
Well, in the context of the DoD, it is a highly rigorous standard. Level 2 is the mandatory baseline for any contractor or subcontractor who needs to handle a very specific, sensitive category of government data.
Okay, and to even touch that data, you have to hit a very specific and frankly kind of intimidating golden number.
Yes, the famous 110.
Right. The requirement for Level 2 compliance is the full implementation of exactly 110 security practices. These are outlined in a document called NIST SP 800-171.
Which is quite the mouthful.
It really is. Now, for those who might not live and breathe government regulations, NIST stands for the National Institute of Standards and Technology. They're basically the government's gold standard for scientific and technical guidelines.
Yeah, they write the rule book. And in this specific rule book, those 110 security controls cover pretty much everything, from how you configure your routers to how you train your employees to spot a phishing email.
Wow.
Yeah, it is a very comprehensive net.
See, reading through these 110 controls, my mind immediately went to aerospace manufacturing tolerances. If you were building an airplane wing and a single rivet is out of spec, the plane doesn't fly.
Right, you don't get partial credit for trying.
Exactly. And with CMMC Level 2, the DoD is taking that exact same approach to IT. You cannot fail a single item. If control number 87 isn't perfectly implemented, you fail.
Yep, it's zero tolerance.
So I have to ask, is this just extreme bureaucratic box checking, or is there a functional operational reason for being this strict?
Well, what's fascinating here is the underlying motivation for that strictness. It's not just about making life difficult for small businesses. It is fundamentally about protecting something called CUI, or Controlled Unclassified Information.
Okay, CUI, unclassified but controlled, that sounds like a contradiction, honestly.
It does sound like one.
Break down what kind of data actually falls into that bucket for us.
Sure. So CUI isn't top secret nuclear launch codes or covert operative identities. It's unclassified, yes, but it is highly sensitive operational data that absolutely must be kept away from foreign adversaries.
Okay, like what kind of stuff?
Think about detailed engineering schematics for a Humvee suspension part, right? Or the logistical delivery schedules of a military base, even proprietary software code used in the defense communication system.
Oh, wow, so very practical day-to-day operation stuff.
Exactly. And if an adversary steals one single piece of CUI from, say, a local machine shop, it might not seem catastrophic on its own.
Right, what's one suspension part schematic going to do?
Right, but if they hack dozens of different subcontractors and aggregate hundreds of pieces of CUI, they can piece together a highly accurate, very dangerous picture of our national defense capabilities.
Oh, I see. It's like a massive jigsaw puzzle.
Exactly like a puzzle.
So one stolen puzzle piece just looks like a splash of blue paint, but if an adversary hacks enough unsecured small businesses, they suddenly see the entire blueprint of a new submarine.
That is the exact threat model driving this whole thing. The Department of Defense realized that their most glaring vulnerability isn't necessarily a direct cyber attack on the Pentagon servers.
Right, those are already locked down.
Right, their vulnerability is the supply chain. It's the thousands of small to medium-sized businesses that provide essential parts and services, but, they traditionally haven't possessed military-grade firewalls.
Or dedicated IT security teams.
Exactly. So the DoD requires zero exceptions to these 110 controls because one weak link in a subcontractor's network can basically create a backdoor into the entire defense apparatus.
Okay, but wait, if one failing grade on these 110 points can tank the whole supply chain, how on earth is the DoD actually verifying this? They can't possibly just trust an honor system where a contractor checks 110 boxes on a PDF and emails it in.
Oh no, under CMMC 2.0, the days of the honor system are completely over.
I figured.
Yeah, the standard reality for Level 2 compliance involves a rigorous formal assessment conducted by a C3PAO.
Oh, great, another acronym for the pile.
I know.
C3PAO, that's Certified Third-Party Assessment Organization.
Right, and these are independent, highly trained auditing firms that are officially authorized by the government to verify your compliance.
So they aren't government employees, but they work on their behalf.
Basically, and they do not take your word for it. They come into your business, look under the hood of your network, interview your staff, and demand concrete documented evidence that all 110 practices are actively functioning.
Okay, I want to pause on a nuance here, because in our stack of sources, there's a detail that feels a little contradictory. Yeah, the documents heavily emphasize this intense third-party C3PAO audit, right? But then they also keep mentioning self-assessments. How do those two concepts coexist if the honor system is dead?
Yeah, it's a really vital nuance. So the DoD does provide a self-assessment option instead of a third-party audit, but it is strictly limited to a very small subset of DoD-approved programs that handle less critical CUI.
Oh, okay, so it is the exception, not the rule.
Exactly. However, and this is the key takeaway for everyone else, a self-assessment is still a mandatory internal milestone.
Oh, really?
Yeah, for absolutely everyone else going through Level 2.
So even if you are getting the official third-party audit, you still have to audit yourself first. It's like taking a practice test before the SATs.
It's basically a practice test. Yeah, but one with actual immediate stakes. As part of your compliance journey, you have to conduct this formal self-assessment. It serves as your final rehearsal before you actually pay a C3PAO to come in. It's how you find your own blind spots before the official auditors fail you for them.
That makes total sense.
And crucially, That self-assessment produces a specific output, which is your SPRS score.
The Supplier Performance Risk System.
Yes, so when you complete your self-assessment against the 110 NDIS controls, you calculate a score based on your compliance.
Okay.
And you are legally required to submit that SPRS score into a central government database. You could think of it as basically your company's cybersecurity credit score.
Wow. So a DoD procurement officer's literally pulling up your cybersecurity credit score before they even look at your manufacturing capabilities or your product pricing.
Oh, absolutely. In many cases, it is the very first filter. If you don't have an SPRS score submitted, or if your score demonstrates poor cyber hygiene, you are functionally invisible to the procurement team.
That is wild.
Yeah, you won't even make it to the bidding table.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting, because we've talked about the strictness, all the acronyms, the high stakes, but how does a normal, 50-person company actually achieve this without grinding their daily operations to a halt?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right, and the sources actually outline a very specific 5-step roadmap for this. And a key detail jumped out at me immediately. They explicitly state this journey takes between 12 to 18 months to complete.
Yes, it is definitely not a weekend software update.
12 to 18 months, that's huge.
It is. It requires a fundamental transformation of organizational behavior. And step 1 of that roadmap is foundational. It's simply understand the levels.
Which honestly sounds incredibly basic, but the sources frame this as a major time investment.
It is, because you are training key staff, attending workshops, and likely consulting with external cybersecurity experts.
Right, to make sure you're aiming for the right target.
Exactly. You have to ensure that aiming for level 2 actually aligns with your specific revenue goals and the contracts you intend to pursue. You have to know the target before you start shooting.
Right, and once you confirm level 2 is your objective, you move to step 2, which is conducting a gap analysis.
Yes, the gap analysis. Entire company, because when I hear gap analysis, I just picture a harsh reality check where some IT guy tells you your passwords are too weak.
Oh, it goes so much deeper than password strength.
Yeah.
A proper gap analysis is a meticulous, brutally honest evaluation of your current state versus those 110 NIST controls.
So it's not just digital?
No, not at all. You aren't just scanning your servers. An assessor will physically walk through your facility.
Really? Like checking doors?
Oh, yeah. Do you have a visitor log at the front desk?
Mm-hmm.
Are server room doors physically locked? They will look at your human resources protocols, too.
What does HR have to do with it?
Well, when an employee is terminated, how many minutes does it take to revoke their access to the cloud drive?
Oh, wow. I wouldn't have thought of that.
Yeah, you are actively hunting for every technical, physical, and administrative vulnerability so you can build a targeted remediation plan.
Which leads directly into step 3, which the sources really highlight as the heavy lifter of the whole process. And that is developing the system security plan, or the SSP.
Yes. If the gap analysis is diagnosing the illness, the SSP is your comprehensive treatment plan. This is the absolute cornerstone of your compliance.
I really want to emphasize the nature of the SSP for everyone listening, because it's so easy to dismiss it as just an IT document that lives on a network administrator's hard drive, right?
A lot of people make that mistake.
But reading the mid-security documentation, the SSP looks more like a legal shield and honestly, a cultural manifesto.
That is a highly accurate way to frame it. The SSP documents the specific mechanics of how every single one of those 110 controls is implemented, managed, and maintained.
Wow, every single one?
Every single one. It defined organizational roles. It dictates how you handle a suspected data breach at 2 a.m. on a Sunday. It outlines how a new hire is trained on data handling on their very first day.
Right, because from the DoD's perspective, if a process isn't formally documented in the SSP, it basically simply doesn't exist.
Exactly.
You can't just tell an auditor, oh, Dave in IT usually handles that. It has to be codified.
Right. Formal documentation proves that your security is systemic. It's not just reliant on the good habits of a few specific employees.
Okay, so a business spends months doing the gap analysis and writing this massive SSP blueprint. Now they have to actually build it. But this brings us to a massive tension point for you, the listener. We are talking about 110 strict military-grade cybersecurity controls. Applying that level of friction to every single laptop, every employee's smartphone, and every Wi-Fi network in a company seems impossibly expensive.
Oh, it is.
So how does a small business afford to build this infrastructure without going completely bankrupt?
Well, that is the pivotal challenge of CMMC right there. If you attempt to secure your entire organization's digital footprint to NIST 871 standards, the software licensing and hardware costs alone will likely be cost prohibitive.
Yeah, that's terrifying for a small shop.
But the framework offers a critical workaround, and it begins with data mapping. Before you buy a single piece of security software, you absolutely must conduct a forensic data inventory.
Okay, practically, how does a business do that? How do you find CUI that might be hiding in like a decade's worth of employee emails or random shared folders?
Right, it's messy. It requires digital auditing tools and extensive employee interviews. You have to trace the whole data lifecycle. Like when the DoD emails you a contract with an engineering schematic, who receives it? Does it get downloaded to a local hard drive, or does it get uploaded to a shared cloud folder?
Right? Or does someone print it out and just leave it on a physical desk?
Exactly. You have to map the exact flow of the CUI from the moment it enters your building to the moment it is destroyed.
Right, got it. Because once you map it, you usually realize you don't need military-grade security on the laptop the marketing intern uses to post on social media.
Precisely. You isolate where the sensitive data actually lives, and that leads to a very specific, highly recommended strategy to basically simplify your compliance burden, and that is the CMMC enclave.
The enclave. Okay, let me test an analogy here because enclave kind of sounds like a bunker.
It does.
But instead of a bunker, imagine a clean room in a semiconductor manufacturing plant. You don't try to sterilize the entire factory floor. That would be impossible and incredibly expensive.
Right. People still need to walk around, drive forklifts, eat lunch.
Exactly. So instead, you build a specialized sealed-off clean room right in the middle of the factory. You install airlocks, you require specific personnel to wear hazmat suits, and you isolate that environment so the delicate manufacturing can happen safely while the rest of the factory just operates normally. Is that what an IT enclave is basically doing?
That clean room analogy perfectly captures the mechanics of an enclave. Actually, in digital terms, you are basically segmenting your network.
Right? Isolating it.
Exactly. Instead of applying all 110 NIST controls to your entire corporate infrastructure, you create a secure, isolated digital environment.
The clean room.
Yes, the clean room, and it is specifically and solely for handling CUIs.
So what does the digital airlock look like? How do you control who gets into this enclave?
Well, building this environment requires strict IAM, which stands for Identity and Access Management. This is your digital airlock.
Okay.
You enforce mandatory advanced multi-factor authentication for anyone even attempting to cross into the enclave. And inside that enclave, you rigorously apply the principle of least privilege.
Meaning an employee only gets access to the specific files they absolutely need to perform their daily tasks. Like the intern doesn't get read access to the folder containing the submarine schematics.
They don't even know the folder exists, yeah. And by restricting all CUI to this segmented enclave, you drastically reduce the scope of your compliance effort.
Oh, I see.
When the C3PAO auditors arrive, they don't have to assess your entire company's network. They focus their audit primarily on the enclave.
That makes the entire compliance process faster, vastly cheaper, and just much more sustainable for a smaller operation to manage long term.
Absolutely. It's the only way a lot of small businesses can actually survive this.
Which brings us to the final two stages of the roadmap. You've mapped your data, you've built the enclave, and you've locked it down. Step 4 is continuous monitoring. How does a small business monitor their network without a massive 24/7 IT department staring at scrolling lines of code?
Well, continuous monitoring isn't really about human beings staring at screens anymore. It's about automated alerting and log management.
Okay, so software doing the heavy lifting.
Right. You configure your enclave software to track specific behaviors. So if someone attempts to log into the enclave at 3:00 a.m. from an IP address in a foreign country, the system automatically flags it, blocks the attempt, and generates an alert.
And crucially, an auditor wants to see that you actually have a process for reviewing those logs, right? Like having the alarm system doesn't matter if nobody ever checks to see why it went off.
That is the essence of step 4 right there. Cybersecurity is a dynamic operation. You have to constantly monitor user activity, patch software vulnerabilities as they are discovered, and regularly test your incident response plans.
So you have to prove that your defenses are actively maintained.
Exactly. It's an ongoing process.
And finally, step 5, the culmination of 12 to 18 months of intense work. This is where you conduct that final self-assessment practice test, calculate your SPRS score, submit it to the government database, and finally bring in those C3PAO auditors.
Yes, and if your enclave is built correctly, your SSP is comprehensive, and your continuous monitoring is active, you pass the audit.
You get the gold star.
You receive your official CMMC Level 2 certification, and you are fully cleared to handle CUI and aggressively bid on those DoD contracts.
So, what does this all mean for you, the listener? What we've learned from unpacking all these sources is that CMMC Level 2 is not just a regulatory hurdle you can sprint through in a weekend.
Not at all.
It is a strategic, year-and-a-half-long investment in your company's operational maturity and, quite literally, in the security of the nation. But the key takeaway is that you do not have to be paralyzed by the acronyms.
That's right.
By following a structured roadmap, conducting a ruthless gap analysis, and leveraging incredibly smart network strategies like data mapping and building secure enclaves, you can achieve compliance without breaking your budget.
Well, so this actually brings up a really important question, right? If we connect this to the bigger picture, there is a very pressing reality highlighted across all these compliance notes.
Oh, what's that?
The Department of Defense is currently expediting the integration of CMMC 2.0 into their contract requirements. It is moving through the final federal rulemaking process right now.
Right now?
Yes, soon this won't just be an expectation. It will be a mandatory, legally binding criterion to even bid on work.
Wow, the clock is ticking loudly.
It really is. And since this compliance journey, from gap analysis to building an enclave to changing company culture, takes up to a full year and a half to implement, what happens to the contractors who are just sitting on the sidelines?
Oh, wow, I didn't think about that.
Right. There are businesses right now waiting for the ink to dry on the final government rules before they take any action.
But if you wait for the mandate to become officially enforceable before you even start month one of an 18-month process,
aren't you effectively locking your own business out of the defense supply chain for a year and a half?
that is a terrifying thought. You cannot build that clean room overnight. You definitely don't want to be staring blankly at that wall of acronyms while your competitors are already safely inside the enclave, winning the contracts you used to rely on.
Exactly. The time to start is right now.
Well said. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. If you're a defense contractor, do not wait for the mandate to tell you what to do. Start your gap analysis today. We'll catch you on the next one.